Everybody, Kevin Harned with you, Ryan Hoke. We're here on a Wednesday evening, looking ahead to Thursday. We've got a lot to talk about. Hurricane Milton about to take aim, as it has been all day, but about to make landfall not too far from now, down on the west coast of Florida.
Yeah, and this has been something we've been tracking pretty much all week. Over the weekend, this thing really started to ramp up, and unfortunately, this is hitting a pretty populated area of Florida, Sarasota, kind of under the gun right now as the eye wall has made landfall and the actual storm getting ready to make landfall any second.
Yeah, we have SkyTrack cameras, not just here in our viewing area, but we have access to them across the country. You're looking at a few of those here. We've pared this list down because, frankly, several of them have lost power. We've got friends down there as well, and I'll be honest, they're saying their power's flickering too. Again, dangerous storm on the heels of Helene. This is something that is going to be problematic for the Tampa Bay area and especially areas just south of there where landfall will occur. Before we get into all of the sort of hubbub of Milton, I want to show you something that's happening here in Louisville. And this is some breaking news they brought you at the end of the 7 o'clock news, but we've got a large fire downtown. It's very close to our studios here.
Yeah, this is, I believe it's the old German Evangelical Church there near Norton Healthcare on Broadway. You see it there. It's an older structure that's, we believe, may not have been being used.
Yeah, I think it's been boarded up for a while.
What it looked like. Yeah.
We pass by this all the time, headed to work. I mean, it literally is across from our studios.
Yep.
Bounded by Floyd and Brook Street on Broadway. That's where you're looking. But this is happening downtown. You can see a number of fire crews with the ladder trucks. They have Broadway shut down downtown just past Brook Street. And then, of course, fighting that fire. They've called out a number of engines to do so simply because of its nature. And, well, our photographer on the scene has mentioned that they thought they may have had one victim involved in that. So I don't know what that means exactly, but that's the breaking news that's happening downtown Louisville. So if you've been smelling the smoke, you see the plume of smoke, that's where it's coming.
Yeah, that smoke made it into our studio during the 7 o'clock newscast. It smells like a campfire in there right now. So goodness, hopefully they get that under control soon.
Yeah, let's talk weather. Let's jump back in. Again, we'll let these cycle through because I want you to see the live images that we do have coming in while we still have them. I know it's dark. It's tough to see. We've got several hundred people coming on board here. And while we're not a local Tampa or West Coast Florida station, we have stations down there, and we're going to walk you through some of their coverage too out of the Sarasota area. They've in fact evacuated their studios and have made makeshift studios just a little bit farther to the north. Lakewood Ranch.
Yeah, so this is their live coverage right here. Sarasota's taking the brunt of this, so that's why these folks had to go to an auxiliary spot here.
Yeah, all right. Let's talk Milton. We've got the storm track for you. So there you can see what's happening now. That storm is making landfall. In fact, may have made landfall. We mentioned the SkyTrack cameras that we have. When we look at that storm, what we're looking for is the center point of the eye to cross the land, and it certainly appears that has happened based on the current radar view. And that would have made landfall just south of Sarasota with wind gusts to 150 miles an hour. It's a Category 3 storm. Northeast at 15 is its movement. It's just about 5 miles off to the west of Sarasota, so it is very close as it closes in on the west coast.
Yeah, near Siesta Key, Milton has officially made landfall. This happened just a little bit ago. Sarasota city skyline is filled with transformer explosions at the moment. I'm surprised there.
No, not with that wind at 120 plus miles an hour. Let's roll through this. It looks like we may have a briefing coming up from Sarasota County. If we get to that in the live fashion, we'll take you to it. Meanwhile, looking at that storm, again, Category 3 now will be weakening a bit over land, but it really never loses its hurricane power as it moves across the peninsula. So it's going to take it not far from Orlando.
And that's the problem. There's going to be an extreme rainfall event tonight north of I-4 between Tampa and the northern suburbs of Orlando there. Some flooding is possible. Thankfully, this is not like mountainous terrain or anything like what happened in western North Carolina with Helene. Florida can take it for sure. But this is going to be a big challenge. Of course, the theme parks, Universal, Disney, both closed tomorrow because of what's going on with all this.
Yeah, we've got a number of folks asking about, is Milton making landfall right now? The answer is yes. And didn't it bring a huge tornado outbreak? The answer to that, too, is yes. And we're going to show you that coming up. Shonda says hello from Jeffersonville, and right back at you. Connie saying hello. Appreciate everybody jumping in. We're just going through some of your comments. We'll be taking a few questions. We're not going to stay on real long tonight, simply because this is weather outside of our area. But we thought with such a huge national weather story, and while we were tracking this and sort of talking about it on our own in the weather office, we said, well, let's just jump on and make sure folks know what's happening around here. And that's what we're doing. So we'll roll through that. Let's take you through the maps. Again, it's not just the wind, which is roaring at 120 miles an hour. These are real-time wind gusts. And you can see, what is that, 81 at St. Pete?
Yeah, that's 81 miles per hour, St. Petersburg there, Florida. My goodness.
Yeah, so strong winds that are damaging even when you're not in the eye of the storm. That's important to note because the wind field extends further out. Certainly hurricane force, that's over 72 miles an hour. So we have hurricane force winds all the way down to, is that Port Charlotte, 79 miles an hour?
Correct. That's Port Charlotte down.
So, and those are the current gust. These are the maximum. Look at that, 93. That would be Sarasota.
And that was at the airport. And there was an independent like storm chaser type sensor that measured 114 mile per hour gust right there on the shoreline. So this is serious business wind wise.
Yeah. And that's, probably before a lot of times these anemometers get knocked out of power and then you can't even measure it. So, again, hurricane force winds moving into Bradenton down to Sarasota. Siesta Key is ground zero. That is the area that we've been watching. Again, all of this is just slightly south of Tampa Bay. A lot of people talking about the wind. Obviously, that brings power outages. That trend's going to continue. You were just talking about a number of power transformers blowing as that storm rolled ashore.
Yeah, those blue explosions in the sky across Sarasota this evening, and that may continue well inland here. It will maintain hurricane status all the way through central Florida. So pretty big power outage likely overnight tonight, and it's going to take those crews a long time because of how widespread this is going to be to get everybody back up and running again.
And, the wind is just one part. You have to deal with rain, which can also cause some flooding, especially after Helene, which dumped a tremendous amount of water, especially with that surge pushing in, but also frequent rainfall. This is, problematic, but nothing like 120 mile an hour winds or even 90 mile an hour winds, nothing like surge. But the heavy rainfall will exist on the northern side. So from Tampa up toward Dade City, just north of Orlando. So not in the eye. The heaviest rain is always displaced just to the north, if you will, of the eye. Now, you look farther to the south, obviously the rain totals are much less.
And then the storm surge is probably one of the biggest impactors for folks who are right along the coast. Tampa Bay was kind of spared by this because of the exact track of the eye. So they're not going to see the extreme storm surge that was feared, but literally just south of there, Sarasota, maybe just south of Bradenton there, seeing the potential for 10 or more feet of storm surge. We've seen some of the sensors on social media posted this evening already showing that coming to fruition in the Sarasota area. So I bet we'll see some video a little later tonight, early tomorrow morning showing that. And you see how that goes down to about Port Charlotte and then it starts to let up slightly, but even like near Port Charlotte, Fort Myers there. 9 feet of storm surge is considerable. That's a horrible situation.
Well, and keep in mind, we haven't talked about the eastern part of the state, but they're going to have surge too, because as the storm moves across, even though it'll be weakened down to a category 1, you still see up to 1 foot to 3 feet of surge anywhere from West Palm Beach all the way up to Daytona Beach. So they're going to see some surge there.
Right. So they see not only the surge there, but they also bore the brunt of the tornado outbreak this afternoon. So it's both coasts of Florida dealing dealing with extended impacts. And speaking of that tornado outbreak,
How insane was this?
this was crazy. And one of these tornadoes may have been a strong EF3 or higher tornado based on some of the video and the reports that we've been getting.
Very rare for Florida.
Yeah, it was in
much less with
Southwest
a tropical system.
Yes, tropical systems typically put down these EF0, EF1, maybe EF2. But if this goes EF3 or higher after the survey in Southwest Florida there, that would be a huge deal. That is rare to see that in South Florida at all. So this tropical system doing some rare things. And another thing I think we should touch on here is just how rare this track has been. Chrissy writing in here and kind of underscoring this. We have family live in Newport Richey. Not sure how close to severe winds that is, or if it's close to storm damage. But we have another comment. This is the one I was actually wanting to get to. Alan saying, lived in the Tampa, St. Pete area from 1975 to 85. Don't remember any big storms. Grandpa said there's no way he'd live on the beach or Treasure Island, etc. This is not common. The last big storm to go through this exact part of Florida, 1921, if memory serves. And the development back in the 20s in that part of Florida was way different than it is now. That area has boomed. Beachfront property, everybody wants it. So 20th and 21st century development, now you've got all this going on. That's a huge deal. It's the third largest city, Tampa is in Florida, second largest metro area.
Yeah, it's wild. I spend a lot of time down in Tampa and Clearwater and have a lot of friends that are from Louisville that have areas down there. And I tell you, a lot of them got trashed with Helene.
Yes.
I mean, the surge that just pushed in. I think in the past, you would get skirted by storms, whether it was Charlie or Irma or Ian or Helene, or there have been a number that have sort of scooted past.
Right.
You think about Helene, that was 150 miles off the coast. They didn't see any wind out of the deal, but it was all surge. So they didn't really anticipate the damage that they received until the water started rising so fast. They're like, oh my God.
And that was like 6-ish feet of storm surge that caused all of that damage.
Record surge by over 2 feet.
A huge deal for those folks. And that was like that outer band of hurricane that came in and pushed all that ashore.
So when they started talking about 10 to 15 feet of surge, everybody was like, get me out of here. No way do we want to go through this again. Not to mention all of the debris that's piled up that would have been projectiles that would have just flown if you had, 50 to 100 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, this was one of those situations where it's better to be safe than sorry on the evacuation. So it's good that a lot of folks got out, even if Tampa Bay didn't take the direct hit and it was Sarasota. Man, that is way too close for comfort here.
Yeah, I want to put up, and we can just show this, but we have some live images coming from the coast. So we've sort of talked about where the storm is. It's making landfall. That's only half of the strongest of the winds. On the backside of the eye wall, that has to go through too. These are live images coming to us from down along that coast. CNN is on the ground there, so we're listening in there, and I'm going to turn the audio off for now, and then we'll come back when it
We
looks
just don't
like
know
they
what
may
they're
be
going to say,
speaking.
right?
Well, and
You don't know.
and we're you never
You don't know.
You never know. But again, we'll watch this. They obviously have good cover. They're on higher ground. They're sort of surrounded by concrete structure, but they are doing some live reports. So we'll check back in. Also, while we're talking about that, I should mention our sister station, Channel 7 down in Sarasota. They've had to move. I mean, they're in a flood-prone area, so they went ahead and evacuated their station, which has to be hard to do when you need the resources to continuously broadcast.
Right. And there's been a couple of strategies here. Some stations in the Tampa area have had like little auxiliary studios set up in places like hotel conference centers, like 10 miles inland. But unfortunately, WWSB, who you're seeing the live stream of right here, they're in Sarasota. They are where the eye wall came ashore. They've seen the worst of this. So they had to take the whole station, all that they could essentially, and move it to another location and run everything remotely here. So they have like a bare bones setup for the viewers in that area. It's kind of a weird TV market, by the way. It's Tampa, Sarasota kind of in one thing, but this is like a Sarasota focused station, a gray television station here that we, of course, co-opt with.
Let's listen in to see if we can hear what they may be saying.
I've got their audio up, but I don't think we can hear it, unfortunately.
All right.
They may be having trouble themselves getting audio.
Well, and I tell you, that's been a thing. I mean, it really has been plagued.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, she's saying they have to get the audio
Yep.
fixed. You could imagine the technical issues they're dealing with, not even being in their normal
Yeah,
studios.
that was a Facebook Live they were trying to take to air, and you got to imagine they had to hook all that up today to try to figure that out.
In the meantime, we'll go back to talking about all the reserves we have. Oh, I believe Sarasota EOC, we might have the sound again. Let's take a listen.
Company to report that there is a wire down. The utility companies will be out and in force trying to get the power back up and running as quickly as possible. Also, flooded roads. We mentioned not to drive through flooded roads. The water can be very powerful. We don't want you to get caught up and to be swept off the road. That has happened in the past in our county, and it's very dangerous. So do not drive through flooded roads. We definitely want you to be safe within your home. If the power went out while you were in your house, you can turn all of the, unplug all of the appliances and make sure everything is unplugged. Because now what will happen is the power comes up, there could be a power surge.
It's a good point. That often
Yes.
causes fires. You saw that. And you saw a number of the electric vehicles causing fires in the last storm, too.
Yeah, they get under that salt water. Salt water is very conductive, and then you get a problem. So even the governor was talking about that down there today.
Or a scooter or an electric
She's
vehicle
talking about it now.
that gets
Yeah.
inundated with storm surge. Though that battery can catch on fire when it gets in contact with that salt water. So move it away from your home, move it out of any other property that could catch on fire. And hopefully, we're not in that situation, but maybe you can protect your property if you take those protective measures. So we'll be providing updates as we get more information. This will be our last broadcast here live at the Operations Center tonight. Again, it's Wednesday night around 8:45 right now. We will plan on posting still.
Oh, that's too bad. They should do another one as the backside of the eye comes through.
So if you have power and you can keep up to date, if you go to our social media.
Yeah, the place looks
pages
like it's
or
all
our
hands on deck,
website,
though.
which
A lot
is
of folks behind there.
Well, you could imagine. I mean, the response often doesn't really even get kicked up until once they really can understand the magnitude of what's happened. And frankly, I'm not even sure if this is the Sarasota County or who this is.
Right.
I'm assuming since it's our Sarasota station that it may be, but a lot of communities are being affected by this, all the way from Sarasota to Pinellas to Hillsborough. So a number of counties are in the strike zone here.
We're here for you, and we're with you, and we ourselves are residents of this county, and so it's our home as well. So our hearts are in the same place as you. We're going to get through this, and we're going to be there for you every step of the way. So thank you very much. Have a safe evening, and stay tuned.
And once again, that is from the Sarasota EOC, the Hurricane Milton making landfall near Siesta Key around 8:40 as a Category 3 hurricane.
All right, there you heard it. Again, Siesta Key was the area that was, again, the right in that zone where the storm hit with 130-mile-per-hour winds. So it was a big deal as it moved ashore.
Yeah, they kept that wind designation of 130 from a little earlier this evening all the way into landfall. Kind of surprising there. But boy, this thing really held its intensity all the way in. And right now you see 120-mile-per-hour winds there, 5 miles west of Sarasota. The last advisory, obviously, it's now inland.
Yeah, very heavy rain falling through Tampa and Tampa Bay. The surge and the highest surge would be on the southern side of that. So if we were to sort of telestrate on this for you, just to point out where that greatest surge would be coming up into this zone. So from Fort Myers up into Sarasota, up into Siesta Key. That is where the greatest surge is. Heaviest rain on the north side, falling from St. Pete to Tampa. That will go right toward Orlando with heavy rain in that area. So again, Tampa may have really dodged a bullet in the sense, and I'm not ready to call it
Yeah,
yet.
we're not done yet.
But the
Yeah.
fact is, the intense surge, the intense everything that may have been going on, and the potential that was there if the storm had gone into Tampa Bay or over towards St. Pete, moved right into Tampa, would have been far different. Unfortunately, it's happened at Siesta Key.
And this was only a matter of like 20, 30 miles if it had gone north. There were these wobbles in the track today as it was trying to make its way ashore. And the fear was that the last minute you'd have that 20-mile north jog, and that would take it right into Tampa Bay. Thankfully, that did not happen. And now that it has made landfall, the risk of anything changing to a point where Tampa would be in bigger trouble than they're already in, is pretty low. So at least a little bit of a silver lining, some good news on that.
I think we may have some of the officials speaking again from Sarasota County, again making landfall 840. Let's listen in.
Are concerned, the projected surge is the greatest concern. For comparison, Hurricane Helene had a surge estimated at 5 to 6 feet, damaged 2,000 properties, and had an estimated cost damage of about $175 million. This storm will likely far exceed those impacts.
Tipton says they are going to work as quickly as possible to get residents back out to Longboat Key after the storm passes, but he says that's going to take time. Reporting in Sarasota, Michaela Redmond, ABC 7 Your local station.
All right. Wow. Those are some astounding numbers, Summer, that we just heard, because he's saying Helene only had 5 to 6 feet storm surge. We know it's going to be much greater this time around with Milton. And he said it damaged about 2,000 properties for a total estimated cost of $175 million.
I can't wrap my head around all the claims.
Yeah, you start to talk about that part of the story where you're dealing with insurance claims, which so many insurance companies have pulled out of Florida, and to find it's expensive. So many people couldn't afford it, so they don't even have it
Which
now.
is a huge problem.
Oh, this is going to be a disaster for some folks that are down Longboat Key, Siesta Key, right up to Sarasota. So this, and not just there. I mean, we're again going to see damage in Tampa. We're going to see damage in Clearwater and St. Pete and Dunedin, and probably as far north as Tarpon Springs and maybe Cedar Key. Those are areas where heavy rain and some flooding will take place, but the bulk of that wind damage is going to be very near the eye.
Yeah, that's right. The eye wall, kind of the ground zero for wind here. And you were talking about all the insurance companies having trouble, covering folks in Florida, having 2 back-to-back hurricanes like this, one making landfall, obviously Helene not doing so, but still causing, it probably is $1 billion disaster for parts of Florida there. That's going to be an interesting story to watch over the coming months as they evaluate what has happened, how much money it's going to take to rebuild, and then what the future looks like moving forward. So a lot of unease right now for folks who may have property in Florida.
One of the rare times that Disney just shut down. You saw that happen on the afternoon of Wednesday, so that was just yesterday.
Yes, it was.
Closed today. The airports are closed. Let's go to Chief Scott Tyler of the Palmetto Police.
Oh, sounds like we're having a little difficulty with him. Chief
Oh, no.
Tyler, are you there?
Yeah, that's tough.
This is rough.
All right. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I think he's
Can you
probably
hear us?
juggling a few
Yes,
things.
we hear you.
Wonderful.
I'm going to stand in the only spot I got reception in the building.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Appreciate
Can you
that.
give us a situation on what's going on in the city of Palmetto right now in North Manatee County?
So probably for the past couple of it's a torrential rain and high winds. It certainly has picked up here in the last hour or so. I understand that the storm just made landfall probably maybe 30 minutes ago.
Yes, in Siesta
But
Key.
we're still, yeah. So we're sitting here watching the radar, and I think that we've got a pretty nasty band that's going to be coming through pretty soon. But that's what's going on. A lot of sporadic power outages in Palmetto. There was some street flooding when I was last out there as the sun was going down. But so far so good. Obviously in the hard for us to do damage assessments. Because the officers have to stay safe themselves. We don't want them driving into flooded waters. We don't want them driving into power lines and things like that. But so far the storm surge risk has radically diminished, and that's what we're really, really concerned about here. So, we appreciate how a lot of our residents heeded the warnings and left and are sheltering elsewhere. And, at First Light, we'll be out there with our public works people doing damage assessments and getting the roadways open. And, we'll just keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, Chief, do you have any priority areas you can tell us about at First Light that you'll be checking out?
Well, it's nice that Palmetto's, it's 7 square miles and it's pretty condensed, so we can cover the city pretty quickly. So, obviously we check our main roads first to make sure that they're clear, and then we get into the neighborhoods. But, we can usually within an hour or two do a pretty thorough damage assessment and get out there removing trees and things like that.
I know a lot of homes on the water there. I saw video pictures from friends already showing the water creeping up to the homes inside the bottom floor. So are you expecting to see a lot of damage to homes?
Yes, we are. And again, with this storm, as it was coming in, one of our big concerns was going to be the storm surge. We all know what the storm surge was forecast for this area, and luckily it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But, a couple of weeks ago with Helene, we saw the worst storm surge that I've ever seen in 30 years of serving here in the city of Palmetto. So I suspect that the storm surge is probably going to be affecting those same areas, and it will probably be at a level pretty similar to Helene or a little bit above.
We'll come back and check in with other officials as they make their way onto television. We're listening to our sister station down in Sarasota, Channel 7 there, and just giving some information from both the EOC, the operations center that they have, and then, of course, the chief from Manatee County out of Palmetto. You're looking at wind gust, 72 mile per hour gust as you look well south. I mean, you think about these gusts. That 63 was just 70 something. And I mean, that's pretty far displaced. Was that up toward Hudson?
Yeah, that is up toward Hudson. The wind field in this thing has been expanding as it's been weakening a bit. The wind shear kind of broadening this whole thing out. So the wind gusts aren't just confined to the eye wall. Even though the eye wall has the worst of the wind gusts, you're still going to have hurricane force gusts at least many miles outside of the eye wall territory there. And that's what we've seen today. You see the max wind gusts up there. And of course, Sarasota with that 83 mile per hour gust. That was just at the airport. They likely had higher gusts a little closer to the coast there.
Still a Category 3 as it made landfall at about 8:40 this evening. Again, the model's having a tough time with the speed of this storm. It really did pick up pace today, making landfall about 6 hours ahead of schedule. They were thinking about 2 a.m. yesterday, and today it picked up to about midnight. And then as the day went on, it looked like it was going to be earlier in the evening. So it almost hit even before sunset. But 8:40 the time, the location, a beautiful area of Florida called Siesta Key. That's not far from Longboat Key. It's not far from Sarasota. It is just south of St. Petersburg, which makes it just south of Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, and we don't know the extent of the damage just yet. This is still an ongoing event here, but Morning Light is going to reveal to these camera crews just how bad the storm surge was. I'm sure you'll see some video of the sort of inside the eye at some point here once that gets uploaded to our sister stations and our sister networks here that we air video from. But this is a situation where you've got a hurricane landfalling at night, and it's super dangerous for folks who stayed behind because you can't see very well. Hard to see where the water is. Visibility is bad because of the wind and the rain that's just absolutely driving all over the place here. So a hurricane landfall during the day is a little bit easier to deal with than at night, when those visibility issues are not only tough on folks who may have chosen to stay behind, but more importantly, first responders. Folks are probably calling 911 left and right in Sarasota right now. But if there's 10 feet of storm surge covering parts of the roads, the first responders can't get through to you. Can't fly a helicopter through this thing, that's for certain. So this is a big deal for folks who, who live down there and who stayed behind. It's a life-threatening situation. And unfortunately, given, some of the impacts that we've heard about this evening, we're going to see the casualty numbers likely come up here.
Yeah, I wanted to punch up. We've got a couple of cameras down. Of course, when it's this dark outside, the cameras, frankly, luckily they even have power, but we can show you a couple of things that are going on. So there's one image. To be honest, I'm not sure where this one is from. This one takes us over toward the Tampa Bay area. Again, you can see just that heavy rain and wind whipping, still have power. So that's always a good sign.
Oh, yeah.
But
we just don't have cameras in the spots where it's at its worst because of power and communications loss. And that's what we saw with Helene as well, up toward the Big Bend of Florida. There wasn't a whole lot of information coming out of the very worst hit part just because the conditions were so bad that, you couldn't have folks on the ground and they couldn't make contact with the outside world very easily during all of that.
Yeah, and again, same story all across the bay. Is you have winds that are up to 100-mile-an-hour gusts probably at this point still. Storm weakening now that it's over land. It takes a while to power down a big fueled up hurricane. So these winds take some time to ease back. It's not like it just hits land and then all of a sudden dies out.
Right.
And you can notice in the background there's some flashing.
Yep.
Now that something else is flashing there, but a nice, look like a transformer blowing in the background.
Get that like blue-green sudden glow? That's usually a transformer.
Yeah, and very heavy rain. The rain is probably something many can deal with. What would be a little unfortunate would be that surge, which they're seeing to the south. We just don't have cameras down there, as Ryan mentioned.
Yeah, we had a Sarasota camera on our SkyTrack network earlier, but during our 7 o'clock newscast, started tilting down a little bit, started rocking, and then whoop, frozen image. And we had about 3 cameras go off all at the same time as that eye wall came ashore.
Let's see what she's going to say. You're on. She
can hear somebody.
She can't hear me.
Yeah, by the way. Yeah.
Playing along.
That's someone at CNN's in her ear right now because she keeps nodding, basically saying, I hear you right now.
Powerful hurricane force winds are blowing through the city of Tampa. Life-threatening flash flooding moving through as more than 6 inches of rain have already fallen and more is on the way as Hurricane Milton makes its way onshore through the Sunshine State.
This is it, folks.
Hurricane Milton's outer bands are lashing the Florida Gulf Coast, and it only gets worse from here.
It'll keep picking up hour after hour. You will be on your own.
Other state officials echoing the same ominous tone.
When you figure it out, like, hey, I shouldn't be here. Hey, I need help. And help's not coming.
It's going to take us hours, if not days, to be able to come to you.
Final calls for preparations and evacuations have now switched to shelter in place and try to stay alive.
Make sure you have a life preserver handy. Make sure that you have plenty of supplies with you because you may be stuck in your home.
Milton's winds are whipping up tornadoes. Florida has already experienced the most tornado warnings in a day on record. One family in Fort Myers was inside their house when a tornado ripped through their neighborhood.
Kid wife come look at it, started getting close, hit the trees, and we all started going for the hallway. Didn't even make it there in time. Started toot, and I heard a piece of glass crack and it sucked the whole roof off, and I felt the thing suck me up, and I grabbed my kid and my wife and hunkered down.
Despite the catastrophic forecasts, some storm veterans are staying put on barrier islands.
We certainly fear the storms and the hurricanes. We just choose to ride it out.
As the evening hours approach, the wait begins for what's on the other side.
Godspeed to all of us that are in the path of this storm.
The power of this storm is already knocking out power for people across the state of Florida. More than 500,000 customers are already without power. In Tampa, Florida, I'm Lee Waldman reporting.
It's bad when the public officials are telling you to have a life preserver. That's sobering. That's all because of the storm surge that can come into your home. If you've got 10 feet of storm surge in Sarasota, just as an example here, that's going to go all the way up to the roof, or not the roof, but I should say the second floor of your house. It will take the first story and flood it completely. And unfortunately, you have situations, and we saw this in Helene with flooding that was even more inland in western North Carolina, where folks had to go to their attic and, try to find a way onto the roof using an axe or whatnot here. So that's why they call it life-threatening storm surge, because it is unsurvivable if you have a one-story house and the whole story of the house is covered in water. And a quick note about that tornado damage that you saw there. Some of that looked to be quite extreme, like we're talking EF2, EF3. And of course, if it does end up one of those tornadoes going EF3 or higher, that would be very, very, very rare, not only in a tropical system, but in South Florida in general. They're just not known for powerful tornadoes
yeah.
down there. That is just not a thing.
Even in the convective season.
Yeah,
Not
even
much
like
less on the
supercell
tropical.
tornadoes down there, you typically aren't like that. That's very rare.
I just sent a text to a family that I know that's in Siesta
yes.
Key, so I'm curious if
Right
they
at
got out.
landfall.
But that would be landfall. So I said, just checking on you guys. We'll see
Oh,
if we
gosh.
hear back. Hope they're okay. Hope they got out.
And even if they did get out, they may not even have cell service if
That's
they
true.
evacuated 20 miles inland, just because you've got so many power outages, internet outages, different communications networks are down. Our infrastructure just can't take 120 mile per hour sustained winds for very long before falling apart.
Yeah. All right. It's 9:05. We'll hang with you for just a few more minutes here. Let's try to get to some questions if anybody has them, Ryan, and then we'll make our way back into the office and get ready for our forecast, frankly, is pretty easy. It's been nice here.
Copy and paste this week, that's for sure.
That's been perfect. We needed a nice little break. And the last hurricane, Helene, of course, whipped up into our area, got sort of sucked in or drug in by another area of low pressure that was in the mid-levels. And that's what made Helene last so long. It took 4 days to get it out of here.
Yes, and that's the crazy part about how it merged with another mid-level low pressure system and then just lingered, which was terrible. Looks like we've got a response there. Oh, well, he says he's literally in the eye right now.
So they are in the eye of the
they've got
storm.
service, which is interesting, to say the least, because, that western eye wall is going to come ashore here in just a few minutes. I'm surprised we got a message back. That's a good sign, by the way. Not only are they alive and well, but obviously communication.
He says it's totally still. It's quiet.
Yeah, right in the middle of that eye. That's incredible. While you're texting him, Lisa Spicer says that she lives just north of Land O'Lakes. She says, next hurricane, I'm heading back home to Indiana to visit. This wind and rain is crazy. Yes. Even if you're inland or not on the side of Florida where the hurricane's coming ashore, it's uncomfortable to be going through a storm like this. It's not your preferred method of spending a Wednesday night. So a lot of folks just like to go wherever, hotel for a couple of days, just to get away from the madness too. And, at one point, Florida had almost 20% of gas stations without gas at one point during the evacuation.
Everybody's trying to get out.
Yeah, trying to get out on 75 or wherever a little earlier this week. And I remember the story of they had police escorts for these fuel tankers coming back in down south on 75 to refuel the stations so that folks could get out. Because even if folks wanted to get out, there were some folks that were like, hey, there's maybe not enough time, not enough money, and not enough gas. So some folks, especially in the Tampa Bay area, may have been stranded just because there weren't enough resources to get out, which is unfortunate.
All right, let's go back to the south. Listen in. We've got another sheriff, chief of police from Holmes Beach.
Looked like Anna Maria Island and Holmes Beach was going to take this direct hit. Do you feel, I know you're getting the northern end of this hurricane, do you feel a little bit of relief from this?
Yes, definitely a little bit of relief. I'll be looking forward to getting out there first thing in the morning to see what it looks like. But this could have been a worse if we would have gotten the hit that we were expecting earlier in the day of a Category 4 direct hit to us, or us on the lower side. If it went into the Tampa Bay, things could have been a lot worse for our island.
That's right. And Chief, just curious, in the last couple of hours, if your department got any 911 calls and if it was quiet. And the second question is, if you guys can tell us about what the plan is at First Light.
Yeah, so not to my knowledge, we haven't had any 911 calls. At First Light, we'll have our first in teams that'll be going in. I'll have Bradenton will be posted up at the intersection as soon as the winds die down, so that nobody goes out to the island until we can go out and assess it and make sure it's safe. So Bradenton Police has been a real champion for us through Helene. They've been out there with us, helping us out. So is Palmetto Police, New College Police, and the Airport Police also came to give us a hand. We also have Panama City is coming out to assist us. So they're coming out tomorrow afternoon with a full contingent to assist us as well.
Wow. And Chief, of course, homeowners always have this concern about possible looting at their homes. Can you, I know you guys have a plan for that, so can you just give a message to anybody who might be thinking potential mischief?
Anybody that comes out there to do potential mischief will be walked out when we arrest them. We will find them. We will arrest them. We are a very active police department. We get the job done out there, and we will make sure that our city stays safe.
And Chief, let me ask you about the debris that was out there from Helene. Do you think that is going to pose any issues or any problems out there?
We'll have to wait and see. We know we still had a lot of debris. We were able to get it off of our major roadways. That was a lot of debris all along our major roadways up East Bay, Gulf Drive, Marina Drive, Palm Drive. All of those roads are major thoroughfares to get in and out.
Well, you hear the chief talking about the debris left over from Helene. Were they going to be able to get that up? Is that gone? Is it blown away? Is it pushed in by more surge? That was always a big concern, which is why the governor sort of mandated that the landfills and collection sites stay open 24 hours this week. And it's why a number of contractors came into all these cities to try to get as much as possible off of the streets.
Yeah, that's a rare situation where you're having to accelerate the cleanup from the last hurricane because the next one will make it worse. And you don't want all of that debris just laying around to become, 2x4 shards to pierce through windows and telephone poles and buildings. So what an effort that was earlier this week to try to get them prepared for the next round of this that's now hitting.
Yeah. Shaletta's asking, are airplanes no longer permitted to fly into the eye of a hurricane like they did years ago? And the answer is, most planes would never even touch a thunderstorm. You'd never want to fly into a thunderstorm. It's why we have flight delays across the country so frequently, especially in what we would say the convective season, because planes do not want to go through a thunderstorm. Now, hurricane and the hurricane hunters are different. They have, first of all, different planes that they're flying. They have a couple that go above the storm, but they have some that go through the storm, and they still do. And those hurricane hunters are valuable, because when these storms are out over, whether it's the Atlantic, the Pacific, or any body of water, the Gulf of Mexico, we don't have a lot of data because most of our data comes from the ground, sending weather balloons up. The only way for us to get data is to fly into these storms and be able to send out dropsondes.
Yeah, and these little dropsondes are like little parachute radio packs, essentially, with all the instrumentation on them to give us the pressure, the wind, etc. Really important stuff. It goes into the computer models that we use to forecast hurricanes and improves them dramatically here. And speaking of dangerous hurricanes here, we've got Grayson asking, hey, or Jerry, I should say, how long after the hurricane goes through will it still be dangerous? And that will decrease over time as the hurricane moves across the peninsula of Florida. It'll start to lose some of those highest wind gusts. Obviously, there's no storm surge once you're away from the coast, so that's helpful too. But this will still be a Category 1 hurricane all the way through Central Florida tonight, most likely exiting the Space Coast very, very early tomorrow morning here. And a dangerous quote-unquote hurricane is all about your exact definition, right? Even a tropical storm like we saw with Harvey can be bad. It was tropical storm strength for much of that in Houston. So it's all about the impacts, right? Like I was saying on air yesterday, it does not matter if this is a Category 5 or a Category 3 at landfall. When it's hitting a populated area with a ton of storm surge, wind, and the impacts that it has, it's very dangerous. One example is Katrina. It hit as a Category 3, technically at landfall, despite it being a Category 5 early on. This was a similar sort of stair step downward in strength before making landfall, but we're likely going to remember Milton for quite some time. This will likely be a name that's retired.
Yeah, back-to-back storms retired, which I'm not sure has ever happened.
Yeah, in 2 weeks' time like that. And everybody's asking what happened to the I, the J, and the K storms, by the way. I see that on Facebook. It's like, oh, it's a conspiracy. They got rid of those 3 names. No, they happened. They were well out into the Atlantic.
Fish didn't affect us.
Fish storms, as we call them. So by the time this storm formed, we were on the M storm.
My buddy who is in Siesta Key, who did not evacuate, who did get hit by the storm and is in the eye right now, which is about to close in on the second half, says all power is out.
Which is no surprise, given what we've seen from the reports on the wind speeds and the power flashes.
All right. Again, we're watching what's happening here or down there from here. Those winds still gusting. In fact, we can take you down to our sister station. Their meteorologist is on the air and has been tracking this storm all day long. Could you imagine, when we're in tornado warning coverage, sometimes we're on for half hour, maybe as long as an hour, two probably at the most, unless it's a really big deal, which we rarely have. These folks down in Sarasota, Tampa, they've been on for the last day and a half.
Yeah, and they get into this rhythm, this routine. If you watch any station down there, they'll go to news for a little bit. They'll go to a reporter. They'll go to meteorologist who'll do about a 2 to 5 minute weather hit, much like you're seeing right here. So everybody just kind of goes round robin pretty much infinitely until they get to a point where there's one of two things here. Either the threat has passed and the storm is exiting, or they can't broadcast anymore, which has happened in the past in many places. Thankfully, these stations down in Florida knew about the risks going into this, all had contingency plans, much like WWSB here in Sarasota, our sister station from Gray Media here. They moved to a facility more inland because it was just too dangerous to stay in their main building, if you will. So many of these TV stations on the Florida coast are literally on the Florida coast. And that's beautiful, obviously. And they're right in these downtown beautiful areas like Tampa and Sarasota. But when you get a somewhat of a rare hurricane track like this one, straight from the west, making landfall in Sarasota, that unfortunately suddenly becomes a liability. So they have to figure out how to take the TV stations we were talking about earlier and transplant everything inland, even if it's just 5-10 miles away from the worst of it, so that they can maintain communications and then somehow make contact with their broadcast tower and all of their internet resources to try to get either a signal out, or even if it's just like a live stream, much like you're watching here. This is the live stream out onto the internet. So some of these places, as you'll see the power outage numbers here, having to deal with loss of infrastructure.
You're watching from Sarasota County. They've got 26,000. Manatee County, again, you get into some higher population, and that's why Pinellas County has so many. That includes St. Pete, Tampa, and Clearwater. So a very large, highly populated area, and yielding the highest power outage number at 206,000 plus.
And these are all preliminary numbers. We are still in this situation with a hurricane. It's about longevity of the wind. Sometimes
we still have the back half to go.
Exactly, right? So that's going to take several more hours. So if the infrastructure didn't fail in the first round, the backside of the eye, it could very well, and then you would see those power outage numbers go way up.
Right. All right. Any more questions before we jump off? We appreciate folks getting on with us tonight. We wanted to give you at least an update on Milton as it made landfall, 8:40 this evening. Siesta Key was the place. Winds of about 120 miles an hour with gusts to 150. There is still cell service in some places because we're communicating with folks down there.
It's amazing.
Though all power is out, at least in the area where we're talking to our buddies at there.
Yeah, Terry's got a question here. South of the landfall may have had higher surge because the winds are blowing onto the land.
True.
North, the winds are blowing off. Correct. What about in the eye? Higher or lower surge?
Well, in the eye, it's still. Right.
Exactly.
So there is zero surge right at the eye, but obviously the eye is only temporary. That means there had been surge before the eye hit, and there will be surge after the eye passes.
So when you're in that southernmost eye wall, in this instance, really close to Sarasota, that's going to be like your max storm surge because you never really get to that calm point there.
Yeah, the highest surge is always just south. So, while it rotates, if you have it going east and west and there's no body of water there, then you're not going to wind up pushing the water in. But at this orientation of the storm, the highest surge would have been just south of Siesta Key.
Another question here from Janie, and I've gotten these questions all week. What about Orlando? So many folks have trips planned down there in the next several weeks. Is Orlando still going to be intact? Orlando will be fine. They've done this before. This will be a Category 1 hurricane for them. When a hurricane traverses the Florida Peninsula, Orlando is usually somehow involved, unless it's like down toward Miami or the Keys here. So their infrastructure is really good to handle this. They don't see direct hits from strong hurricanes because by the time you get to Orlando, you're so far inland, this hurricane has started to weaken and fall apart. And that's exactly what they'll see. The one thing they need to watch for, though, on the north side of Orlando is certainly the rainfall. Flooding could be a big issue, but that's temporary. So places like Disney, places like Universal, wherever you like to go in Orlando, they'll be fine. But it's going to take a little bit to clean up from the flooding. Obviously, when you do have these 70+ mile per hour gusts, there will be some infrastructure problems. There likely will be power outages in Orlando as well. But the impact of the storm on Orlando is peanuts compared to places like Siesta Key, Sarasota, areas just south of Tampa, right on the coast. Because by the time you go all the way down I-4 to Orlando, we're down to Category 1 hurricane or strong tropical storm here. And obviously Orlando's so far inland, you don't have storm surge either. So you don't need to worry so much about Orlando. Obviously, it's a big deal for them, but yikes, you just saw that there. Yeah. And obviously he did too. His reaction there. Goodness.
Lightning show out there. It looks like almost some sort of a.
He's calling it lightning.
I'm not so
curious
sure
to see if that was lightning or the power going out.
Power out this hour. Maybe that is a part of it. Take a look at this one.
Yeah. Other folks on our live stream here calling it a power flash when they saw it.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Some sort of a part of a lighting grid or a light that came off of a building in downtown. So that was something also that really caught our eye. Let's go ahead and take up the next slide if we can and see what you guys captured all throughout the evening here, because there are so many images.
We're going to let just the video play and I'll turn his voice off. We can just see those trees. So again, the eye wall is more than halfway on. That's the landfall. How much more time do we think that the hard hit areas of Sarasota and Siesta Key still have? Obviously, the back edge of the eye wall is just moving in. So what, another 2 hours?
At most. Yeah, because by the time, once you're out of that eye wall, you start getting into the outer bands and it's not going to be as bad. Your storm surge, obviously that's going to start to lessen as well. So 2 hours, that sounds good to me. Looks like, some of the dry air kind of wrapping in on the back of the system.
That definitely helped it.
Yeah, you can see kind of like a very crisp edge to that cloud shield there west of Sarasota. I'll just pop that up so you guys can see literally what we're talking about. But it's this crisp edge that you see on the western side of where that gray is, where the clouds are. That's dry air pouring in behind this thing. That helped to weaken it today, as Kevin was just referring to. But also, too, on the back side of this storm is cool and dry air for the rest of the week there. So as folks are trying to get the power back on, living without power, it's not going to be like the steamy, hot mess that sometimes the post-hurricane environment can be like. This, fortunately, is happening late enough in the season that they're actually seeing fall-like air moving in. So that'll make it a lot easier on first responders, first light in the morning, start to see that cooler, drier air. It'll make it easier on folks that have to sleep in their homes without electricity, try to keep the windows open with the screens down, of course. And for folks who are trying to pick up debris, you're not gonna have to sweat it out. So that's another piece of good news out of this, if you can find any, that the post-storm environment here will be at least pretty hospitable to folks trying to recover.
Yeah, and sorry I'm on my phone.
No, that's good. I'm glad.
The people in Siesta Key are actually texting for information.
Kevin, they need your help.
Yeah, I'm trying to let them know what's going on.
Kevin's over here playing superhero right now.
Well, no, not at all.
Key.
They're just giving information that they're asking. So, goodness, can you imagine? I think, I don't know. If it were a Category 4 or 5, I definitely would not write it out.
I wouldn't be there.
I've been in the categories 3s, back in. I mean, it's been a while back, but we used to go to the hurricanes.
Oh, like Floyd, yeah.
Well, we went to Floyd,
Yeah.
Bonnie, Michael. We've been in many of these hurricanes, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, one time we were in a pretty rickety hotel. The roof was peeled off of it in the middle of the night.
All right.
So you get no sleep. You're working all the time because you're trying to tell the stories of what's happening in these places.
Right.
So it's not easy to be there. Power's out. There's no food if you haven't taken it. So you're going to eat, peanut butter and crackers for a week.
It's like deep woods camping, if you will, except it's hot,
except for
it's
you're
humid,
wet and you're hot and humid.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's terrible. It's not like storm chasing where there's a tornado for 5 minutes and then it's done and you go to a hotel and everything's fine.
Yeah, you forgot the steak dinner before the hotel.
It depends on what kind of day we're having, I guess, right? Is it steak or fast food?
Yeah, I quickly learned that I would trade tornado chasing for hurricane chasing pretty quick.
Yeah, they're two different beasts. That's for sure.
All right, what else we got? And then we'll wrap it up. It's 9:20.
Not a lot of folks asking questions, just kind of watching with us here. Oh, the Waffle House index. I saw several Waffle Houses close. That's a bad sign. It is. FEMA has a Waffle House index because Waffle House has such an amazing disaster preparedness program that FEMA can literally tell where things are bad based on where Waffle House is closed, which is amazing, by the way.
That seems crazy.
Now I'm hungry. Jim Cantori was in Tampa, says Shonda. Yes, I saw he was down there. He was
Did you see him talking to Lieutenant Dan?
I heard about that.
So Lieutenant
Yes.
Dan, I'm not sure, he's an amputee, and I'm not sure how that
Yes.
happened. Maybe he was in the
I
service.
saw
of
the
some
tweets
sort.
about this. Yeah.
But he was down on his sailboat in Tampa Bay.
Yes.
And he said, yeah, I'm not gonna get out. I'm staying put. So as it turns out, with the storm going in the direction that it went, probably helped old Lieutenant Dan out a little bit.
If he ended up staying overall.
I have a feeling, yeah, he was pretty adamant about that.
Let's see here. Matthew says Tampa's had over 5 inches of rain in an hour. These rainfall rates are super intense. Yes, they are. Brandon says he just joined. What was the wind gust on Milton? Gusting right now to 150, by the way. The highest measured gust I saw was like 114, 115 near Sarasota. We'll see what those end up being in the morning here once we get more information in. And then finally, Mindy says, any news from Cocoa Beach, other side of Florida there? They were close-ish to that tornado outbreak today. I'll be curious to see, what the ratings are on that, but I haven't heard anything from Cocoa Beach proper.
Well, that brought up a good question. I saw Laura ask earlier. She was like, how do they determine the tornado strength once the hurricane goes through?
Oh, that's a great question, right? So some of these will be easy because they happened in the initial bands and there won't be like the mass of the hurricane going over those tornado tracks. But for others, you will have intermingled tornado and hurricane damage. So I'm sure the National Weather Service, Melbourne and down toward Miami, they probably tried to get out as much as they could today to at least kind of do an initial survey. Okay, here was a bad one, there was a bad one, just to be able to have pictures to pick out that damage from hurricane damage. But that is a tough gig.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Well, we're going to wrap it up. Appreciate everybody jumping on. We're at 9:25. Hurricane Milton making landfall at 8:40 this evening. Siesta Key winds. We'll get the more precise number, but should have been around 120 miles an hour with gusts to 150. And we'll see what kind of damage there is. I'm not sure we'll have a whole lot for the 11 o'clock broadcast, simply because most people are still hunkered down and that back edge of the storm will be moving through by then. But certainly by daylight tomorrow, the damage assessments will begin. We'll know what emergencies have taken place because we have contact with so many of the emergency systems down there that we'll be able to at least give that information. But what a night it's been. Folks in Tampa really thinking that they were somewhat spared as this storm moved just to their south. Could have been a lot worse for those folks in that Sarasota, pretty populated.
That's a big place.
St. Pete, Tampa, even more populated.
Yeah, it could have been worse, as they say, but our hearts go out to those folks down there, and of course to the first responders who are going to be trying to get things back to normal. So thank you for joining our broadcast this evening.
All right, have a good night, everybody.